Thanks for listening to this new episode of the Business of Fun podcast. I am your host, Dave Wakeman. My guest today from Gold Comedy is Lynn Harris. Before I talk to you about my conversation with Lynn, let me remind you to check out my website. That's davewakeman.com, where you can get the store, the blog, all the stuff about Dave, right? Check it out. And also, check out the Talking Tickets newsletter at talkingtickets.substack.com. If you're listening to this podcast, odds are you're going to dig it. And we have a Talking Tickets Slack channel, which by the time you listen to this probably has hit over 400 people from all over the world, where we're talking tickets and all the other stuff that's going on in the world, such as marketing, legislation, strategy, anything that's entertainment and ticket relating. We try to get into over there. So check that link out in the show notes. So back to Lynn. Lynn is the founder of Gold Comedy. This is, she calls it the space where women, non-binary, and others can come together and learn, collaborate and learn about comedy. I think it's a great idea. We talked about, using people, giving people voice, I think is the best way for me to put it. We talk about culture. We talk about how diversity is something in our culture and our entertainment that people want. We talk about how, not having diversity is limiting. We talk about using humor in your writing. We talk about, how you can learn to be funny. We talk about brands and where they like to find humor. We talk about specifically how people in the business of marketing and selling live events, sports, theater, all those things can use these skills to become better at giving customer service, better in dealing with stressful situations in your life, and better at just being present in the moment. This is a really good conversation. I think you're going to enjoy it with Lynn Harris on The Business of Fun. All right, I would like to welcome Lynn Harris to the Business of Fun. Good morning, Lynn. How are you?
I'm pretty good, thank you. How are you doing?
I am hanging in there. It is cold in my office, but other than that, I'm totally living it up here.
Brisk. It's brisk.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's been so cold this winter. But that's nobody tunes into and downloads the Business of Fun to hear me talk about the weather. I am excited to talk to you because you have created a business called Gold Comedy, and it's about teaching people how to be funnier. Has a social justice component. It's about creating change. It has like all of these really, really cool things that kind of connect within your business, and I'm really excited to learn a little bit more. So thank you for being here. Let me start out by asking you to tell people what Gold Comedy is, because
Sure.
maybe this is new for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. And yeah, we 100%, I hope that we're teaching people to be funnier. And just to build on that, we are here to directly help people succeed in their comedy careers and their creative side hustles. So we do welcome novices who are, aspiring and committed, but we also have a lot of people who are well on their way. And in a minute, you'll see why they come to us. That is because we are the comedy school and professional network and content studio, where in particular, women and non-binary folks and what we call others are able to, as I said, build their comedy careers and creative side hustles and join a powerful collaborative community and make funny stuff that actually gets seen on all kinds of stages and screens. And really why we're there is we're there to provide an alternative to, honestly, the bro vibe that hasn't changed so much since I did stand-up throughout the 90s. A ton has changed, let me be clear, before people start frantically typing comments. So much has changed. And at the same time, exactly the same time, and we can do this because we're grown-ups and we can hold conflicting ideas in our heads. A ton has changed and it's so much better. And at the same time, I cannot believe how much more needs to change.
So first of all, they won't be leaving comments. They'll be loading up my email
Yeah,
inbox. Yeah,
however
yeah.
they yell at you,
They'll yell at me, so it's fine. So you say whatever. Usually the crazy stuff comes from me. I was going to use the bro vibe because I was like, even when I'm around stand-up comedy, from time to time, there's still a little too much of that bro vibe. And what I dug about, what you're doing is like the women, non-binary, and others thing. It's because number one, to me, it's something that'll never change is that representation matters,
Yes.
right? And giving people a platform where they feel safe and secure and then testing out these limits. I think that that's it should just be something everybody considers. And the thing is like if you're in an environment where everything's like there's a certain amount of enforced conformity, even if it's not explicitly stated, it limits the possibility. And on top of that, like all these things is like we should be working to improve things every day. Should be the bare minimum. But it's hard because I know that that's not necessarily the point of view that the culture wants us to take right now. So I guess I'm kind of curious about how do you help people understand that like this change is important and like continuing to grow in the change is like super important.
Well, okay, so much, you teed up so many good things for me there. Yeah. Yes, 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 and yes, and yes. And to answer your questions, first of all,
I am like, woke, Lynn.
Yeah.
And well, if you come at me, I will.
No, that's not even it. It's
go
just
back.
That's not it. It's just that they were sharp. You those are sharp questions. And one is, the culture's already there. I know we hear a lot of people shouting here and there, but the culture's there. Like I don't have the stats in front of me, but in terms of what people want, what people say they want, and what the development executives respond to is they want more inclusive programming. They want to see people who look like them, in comedy and comedy shows and TV, whatever, movies. They want to see people who look like them, and they want to see people who don't look like them. And both of those are cases for inclusivity, right? So like the case is made. Like people are just yelling louder. Like it's done.
The battle's over.
Right.
We've won that war.
Yeah. Right. There are still battles, but the trend, the stats tell us that that's what people want.
Mm-hmm.
You're also really right to say that homogeneous environments actually limit everybody. And Cameron Esposito said this a long time ago that and I'm a veteran of countless, to use stand-up as an example, it's not the only, but countless lineups that are where I was the only woman. And this still happens. This 100% still happens. It happened the other day when I was looking up good shows for a friend of mine to go see. I was like, oh, look at that. Only one woman in all these shows. And it's what's checks watch. It's 2026. So, but that doesn't serve anybody, including let's assume that a show that has one woman is mostly dudes, and probably I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably very many white dudes. And in that case, no shade to the individual comics, whatever. In that case, that's making their job harder too, because none of them is going to stand out. It's, the people afterwards are going to be like, yeah, that guy was really funny. Which one? The white dude. Which one? I don't remember. Seriously. And that's the booker's fault, and that's the management's fault. It's not the comic's fault. And so inclusivity isn't just, you're right that it's the right thing at the end of the day, full stop, because it is good. Yeah. But it matters in every single industry because the people who get the jobs are people. It's an economic issue. It's a job. And they are humans. And also we all know in every single industry, it makes the product better. Mm-hmm. We know this. That's handled. It's done. So you don't even have to be like on the right side of history to think that to support the idea that the product, a TV show, a film, a comedy, whether who you see or who's in the writer's room or who's in charge, if that is a diverse and inclusive group, it's done. We know that the product will be better. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's I've always framed it, and you framed it as like they're humans from the people who, the stand-ups and the comedians and the writers. But I've also always framed it as a economic issue for the decision makers, because I'm like going, look, if you open up, you give more room for more people, that just opens up your customers. You're going to reach more people.
No
I was
kidding.
like going,
Right. And here's
as
an
a brand
example.
manager, right? I was like going,
Right.
you want to create the most diverse audience that you can because it gives you more people to give you their money. But
It's
that
so
often is
silly. I know
crazy
we can
to
have we
people.
can talk about why it's morally better, but like, come on. I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example from and by the way, before I give you my example, I'm reaching down in my fake office for my very real not extension cord, computer cord thingy. Okay, now we're plugged in. Okay. Fake office in the background, very real electricity. Anyway, here's an example, and I'm going to use names because I don't care. I think it was this summer, Venerable Comedy Club. I worked there when I worked in Boston. Venerable, Nick's Comedy Stop in Boston, did a show and was promoting a show called Chicks at Nick's. First of all, come on, Nick's. I really love promoting women. I'm kind of tired of making shows that are all women just because it makes us different and extra and separate. And it implies that all the other shows are all dudes, but whatever, that's not the point. You can argue about that, but that's not the point. The point is, how did they promote it? The image on the Instagram, you can go find it if you want. The image on the graphic was pictures of the performers photoshopped onto the naked legs of Barbie dolls. That's right. You just went, yeah. So now, and some of the comics that are on the show commented, "Oh, haha, that's funny." And I don't really, it doesn't matter to me. I'm not. It's sort of irrelevant to me whether an individual comic who was on that show liked the image or not. That's not my business.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, what are you thinking, Nix? You just to people who will be turned off by that, who are legion. Why would you do that? Why would you basically tell women as performers and audience that they're kind of not welcome?
Yeah, well, it's dismissive, and it's interesting because I know one of the things you talk about is building brands. One of the things I teach students, and when I do in my executive MBA class, is that picking an enemy is a great way to build a brand. But this isn't, and somebody's probably sitting there listening going, this is
right there.
Yeah, but I was going to say, but this is not what I mean. This is dismissive of more than half the population. It's like, why? No, pick an enemy going, some of these this is not funny, or this person is does stupid stuff or something. There's way better. This is dismissive. And the thing is just because it's women, it doesn't mean that they can't be funny. It's you still have to be able to stand on your own 2 feet as a comedian. So why are you going to focus on something that is out of their control? And it really is just, to me, can come across as overly antagonistic and dismissive.
Yeah, I'd be like, what comedy show should I go see in Boston, New York tonight? Me just as a consumer, and I'd be like, oh, not that one. I mean, and not everyone's going to be offended by it. That's fine. But that's not the point. That's pretty baseline in the dictionary under literally objectifying women. This is old. This is old stuff.
Yeah.
So
it's not even well done.
I know, and it's I'm too old to be offended. It's just that it's just you're not good at your job if that's the ad.
See, this is usually what I say is you're just not good because the thing is there's so much room for creativity and then people don't take it. And to me, it's interesting because I know the challenge of getting people into these small rooms is a great challenge, right? Because there's not always a huge audience of people who are going to go see stand-up comics at stand-up comedy shows, right? Developing that audience is really hard. It's easy to go see somebody when they're famous. It's not easy then. So the thing is you have to make it accessible for people, right? And so I just it boggles my mind that people would they would just be tone deaf. I think would be the nice way for me to put it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so
that's about it.
Yeah. So one of the things though, and we talk about this, how do we create the change? But I think this ties into one of the big focuses of what you're working on, which is teaching people how to make folks laugh a little bit better, right? And using comedy as a tool, because I think, I know you talked to the Chicks at Nick's as the example, and some of the women didn't they were like, oh, kind of laughed it off. And my my take, oh, I know, my take on everything is like, oh, when something's strikes me as being ridiculous or wrong, or is to be kind of like is the use humor, use ridicule, and as tools to deflate these ideas. So I'm curious about how you teach people how to use comedy and humor as a tool, because I think it's very, very valuable. As I told you before we started recording, this is audiences, a lot of people who are in the arts, in sports, in entertainment. And I think understanding how to use humor as a tool will be helpful, because a lot of times we think about these things as being the business of fun, like the name of the podcast, but they're very like top down organizations, very restrictive in the way they approach things. And I think humor can diffuse some of these needlessly tense situations.
Absolutely. So first of all, I believe, and I don't have this in front of me, but we can all Google it afterwards. But it's something like this, that 4 out of 5, or let's just say a majority of consumers want their brands to be funny. And that's not necessarily only because we want to laugh. It's because why do we want to laugh? It's because when a brand is funny, it actually generates trust for that brand. Mm-hmm. It makes the consumer think like, oh, that brand is like kind of like willing to be human, willing to be silly, not just some sort of like generic corporate monster, And mm-hmm. So that's one thing. It's I mean, this is an old example, but like Steakums was famous for having a hilarious social media feed. It's meat. Like it's not an inherently funny brand, but everyone loves that. Right. And everyone, like, I'm a vegetarian and I still was like, go Steakums, like, because I just appreciated that it makes you really feel that like someone human was in a room somewhere at Steakums and it was like, listen, guys, we need to make our feed funny. And it worked. And, that's a very specific example, but it's really true. And it just makes people trust you, and it makes you feel real to people. And I think that translates over to, entertainment products and comedy itself. And there's kind of two ways that comedy can be sort of a deliver. When I say comedy, by the way, I mean like comedy, humor. I mean all the things. Comedy as a form. There's a couple ways that it can be really a delivery system for change. One is on purpose. Even as it entertains. And an example would be the recent reboot of One Day at a Time, the sitcom, which I watched, when I was young, and happily watched over again. And the reboot was mainly that it was a Cuban immigrant family. And mostly the plot was family stuff. Like a leaky faucet, mostly. So what the comedy did there is that you were just watching it, like it made the gears turn in your head without you even realizing that when the plot is mostly the same thing as a white people sitcom, it makes, even when you don't realize it, it gets into your head that like it normalizes the mm-hmm. idea of people of color just being quote unquote normal American families. Also, it took on some issues that had to do with immigration. But you already had built a trust relationship mm-hmm. with the show. So even if you were like, I don't know, even if you hadn't thought about the issues that it raised around immigration, you already had this trust with the show. And so you're more receptive to hearing this kind of personal take through your now friends who you're watching on this show. Also, when we don't explicitly, we do teach late night writing, but other than that, and we do teach comedy about what we call comedy about trauma. But other than that, we don't specifically teach, how to write comedy for social change, because we're not against it. I mean, but because to us, there's a more kind of fancy organic thing happening at a certain level, which is just women are still, and anyone who's basically not a white dude, or a straight white dude, is kind of still thought of as an other in many circles of comedy, expressly or implicitly. And so our, kind of game plan is the more we can make it, and also, by the way, comedy is hard for everybody. everybody. But the more we can make it easier for the people for whom it's harder, the more we create that inclusivity we just talked about. And then what happens? Let's say, to use the example of stand-up, let's say you're in a comedy club and it happens to be a fairly inclusive lineup, and one of the comics is, a woman, or, whatever. One of the comics is a person of color from a country you're not familiar with, or one of the comics is trans, or whatever it is. And so the social contract you have is that when they are talking, for 8 minutes or more, you are listening. And it doesn't matter if they're talking about immigration. It doesn't matter if they're talking about LGBTQ. It doesn't matter if they're talking about an issue that they're trying to sort of open your eyes about. They could be just talking about like their weird family, just like you, their annoying kids, just like you, the weather, just like you. And just the fact that they're talking on stage and you are listening, again, without necessarily realizing it, makes those gears of change kind of grind along in your head, because you just had that experience. You don't leave thinking like, I've now learned that I must listen to trans people. It's not necessarily that explicit, but it might be. But the point is that you did, and you absorb it, and it adds up to normalizing and a new idea of who gets to talk, who has power, who do you listen to. And so that's why, of course, comedy is extremely powerful in terms of explicit social change, but it's also incredibly powerful in all its forms as air cover for a lot of deeply changing norms and hearts and minds.
Well, what I like about the idea you said, we don't teach comedy specifically for social change, and I like that because I've seen it happen. At some points, I probably have even been guilty of it, is, coming across as overly heavy-handed. And I think if you're writing specifically for that, like that kind of outcome, it's easy to miss the mark. And what I find helpful really about comedy, or just any art in general, is the idea that, is that normalization, it's the kind of, we talked about brands earlier, and brand awareness is chipping away, it's like a lot of times I talk about how many sales calls it takes to make a sale, and they'll be 11 or 12. How many times does exposure to an idea does it take for you to accept that idea? And this is great because you make it, I think the best way to put it, you make it kind of non-threatening. Because I think like that can be an issue, you have to meet people where they are, and I think that's really what I find very helpful about this approach. But maybe I'm just like, maybe I am a little too much the target audience.
It doesn't matter. You're a target audience for this conversation, but you're not necessarily the only target audience for the kind of change that we're talking about, and it's really only entertainment that can give you what you just called that repeated exposure, because people who are the number of people who'd be exposed to these kind of interesting messages and new faces and new voices and kind of humanizing all of these social justice issues are not the ones, and this is no shade, I'm not insulting any people, are not the ones who are going to be like seeking out the TED Talks and the Atlantic articles on these issues.
I'm not seeking those out at this point either.
Right. So I'm not talking about smart dumb. I'm not talking. It's just that they're at all. I mean, I'm really not. I'm just saying who is going to be the sheer numbers of people, just because of the way the culture works, who are automatically going to be exposed to a whole lot of fun entertainment all the time, are larger than the number of people who are going to, have a highly curated playlist on NPR. It's just numbers.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to another. I mean, again, when I try to express these ideas to people who are decision makers, I go, think about it. Where is your non-audience? Like, who are your non-customers, Like, you might have and this goes to even probably hits back with Chicks at Nick's, which is like, you're needlessly shrinking your audience already. When the thing is like, you should be looking at what these people who won't go to see you are doing and thinking about, because they're a bigger audience. And the thing about using entertainment in this way is that it's so easy for people to tune out and turn off your ideas. So you need to entertainment, even if it's not haha funny, amusing or like kind of ironic, is like a baseline because you have to be able to stand out. If the idea doesn't stand out, it's lost anyway.
Right. Well, two things about the audience. Right, like Nick's or any other comedy club. Sorry, Nick's. You've become a metaphor for bad branding. But
Nick's is definitely leaving me an email.
I know. Sorry, Nick. Sorry, not sorry. A comedy club, okay, why don't people go to stand-up comedy? I hear people say all the time they're afraid of like being singled out for like crowd work, which by the way is an unfounded fear. Comics are nice, but in any case, that happens so rarely. But in any case, or comics are mean in crowd work once every never because they know it's a bad idea. But in any case, let's say someone has a fear of going to stand-up. Why don't you being singled out by a comic? Well, guess what? We're going to run a show where the name of the show is Comics Who Don't Do Crowd Work. Now, would you come to the show? Like, that's the way to find the people who aren't coming, right? I'm just making an example, right?
Yeah.
That instead of alienating people, why don't you, that would be some fun branding. Anyway, the other thing is that the funny thing about being exposed to in the kind of easy to receive way to different ideas, socially relevant issues, whatever it is. The other thing that entertainment can do is, and it's a bit of a paradox, but the more when you're the characters on a TV show or the jokes you write as a comic or maybe as a comic, a funny storyteller, whatever it is, the more specific you are, the more relatable you are, which sounds funny, right? Because like the more specific I am about, mom from New York, dad from the South, grew up in Boston, blah, 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 Bruins, blah, 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 only child, but, those are really specific things, right? Yeah. But peculiarly, maybe you have nothing in common with any of that, but the more specific I am, the more relatable I am because I paint such a vivid picture that you can tune in to the primal stuff. You can tune into, if I start, you can tune, setting aside my story, you can tune into people, can tune into, having the same at their core family issues, being lonely, being afraid of XYZ, all of the primal human stuff that we have that's relatable. Only by creating a specific, highly specific scenario can people actually tune in and relate to it. Because like if I just said like any children of divorce here, if you aren't a child of divorce, then you're like, nope. But if I paint a picture of like all the reasons my family was weird and divorce is sort of part of it, which my parents weren't divorced, I'm just making this up, then you're like, okay, that's kind of like the way that my family was weird, and you have an in, Yeah. So it's funny that it works that way, but it's true. So that's the other way that, and comedy, that's true for things that are not comedy, but comedy can be extremely powerful in creating that relatability.
Well, I'm glad you brought the point up about how it can relate to not just comedy, because I think this is an important lesson that people miss. Is like they think that even the most broadly popular thing, like Hamilton, is for everybody, and I go, it's not, right? Like it's those kind of differences and that specificity and those kind of edges that people latch onto and they catch onto, and that make something like Hamilton. I was thinking about the producers when, and like all of these shows that are really, really popular, people catch on because of that sort of grittiness of the idea. Like there's like something for them to latch onto, not how, oh my God, it just sort of captures everybody's life. It may, but that's not the point. The point is this is where I think the specificity, this is where you're picking an enemy. You're picking an idea in opposition to what the norm might be, or what your norm might be, because You need to be like, this is who this is for, and it's not for this group, and that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, better, as well as anyone that like if anyone says their product is for everyone, they're incorrect.
Absolutely, for no one then.
Right. Right. Same with comics. Like that's why, a lot of people try to ask me, but like, what about this? And what if doesn't this comic make you angry? But I'm like, yeah, but it's okay. Because they're just not they're going to have success with their people. And I don't need to, and I don't know if you can hear New York outside, but there's
I definitely.
Yeah. But there's a comedy emergency. But yeah, at some level, of course, everyone's going to have their people, and I'm not, and of course, everyone. That's why when people say like you can't say that anymore, I'm like, yes, you can. You just can't say it to everyone.
Yeah.
Like you'll be fine. You'll find your people. That guy found his people.
Yeah. The job is just to be funny or be entertaining, and sometimes when you're squeezing those things in, they're not necessarily funny, but that's that's because it's not my taste, and I think that's an important lesson to teach people, right? It's like just because it's not for you, it doesn't mean it's not for somebody. Sometimes I go, God, I don't know who this is for, but that's not for me to. That's not my
problem.
Yeah, I was going to say this is a great, like for the people listening to this is a great lesson, because the thing is that what you have to do is be able to detach yourself and go like, well, it's not for me. I'm not the customer of this. So who is this for? And what are they using it for? And then you can make the decision how to present your idea or your program or whatever from there. And, and this is a really great lesson. So, but you're talking about being specific as one of the keys to being better at comedy. And I know like the big core is like teaching people how to be funnier and how really use comedy to like in their day-to-day life. Besides being specific, are there some other ideas that you try to impart on people and get people to focus on as they're developing this comedic skill that they have?
Sure. And again, just to be clear, if you want to be funnier in your daily life and just be funnier in general, please come check us out. And we also, absolutely, that's a great thing. And also, we're super serious about people succeeding in comedy related jobs, getting better at the skills that not only of getting funnier and better at the kind of comedy they do, but also doing so in a way that makes you hireable and bankable. And we have people, our people make stuff. We make web series. We have digital sketches. We have people doing solo shows. So it's the skills, but it's also the stuff. So to answer your question and related to that is, at the end of the day, this will not surprise you, but at the end of the day, it's about getting in your reps. Whatever kind of comedy or comedy related goals you have. And some of our people are people who have already succeeded, had great success in a non-comedy related job, or maybe even a non-entertainment related job, but they want to write that damn pilot, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. We have a veterinary oncology surgeon who fits that description. Either way, it's reps. So what we try to make available to people is not only the opportunity to improve the skills that they already have, whether it's in stand-up or sketch or even like production, mm-hmm. editing, light and sound, all those things. We want to give them the opportunity to practice. And that's why, people ask me all the time, well, can anyone learn to be funny? Can you teach it? And I'm like, yeah, but of course, but it's only when they do the work. I can't do the work for them. We have someone who came to us a few years ago, and she's a retired high school art teacher. She's a grandmother and like not in a comedy city. And she said, she said, like, I know I'm funny, but I want to know how to do comedy. And she knew there was a difference. She knew that being funny didn't mm-hmm. equal comedy success. It just means you're funny. And she worked super hard for the last 2 or 3 years. And I finally met her because she just came to New York in September to do her first solo show as part of a solo show festival in New York City. And how did she get there? Because she worked her butt off. She took our stand-up boot camp class, I think 10 times, also helps teach it now. She writes for a sketch team, and it's reps. So it's not magic, but whether it's stand-up or script writing or video editing or screenwriting or video editing, the magic, there's no magic.
The hard work is the magic.
Practice.
I tell that about almost everything. It's like you can't, I was like, when people go, oh, you must have been like a born marketer and born at strategy. I go, I think more than anything is I worked my ass off is really what it was. And I was just like always in the weeds of all these decisions. And it's nice to know that that's the same thing, and that like you can just learn it, right? It's great. So Lynn, now we talked about gold comedy. We talked about creating change. We talked about making folks laugh. I think one final area I want to hit on really quickly is that you taught a humor writing for journalists course, and I told you that I thought it probably had some parallels for people who are in the businesses of fun. And I know that I do a training every so often about writing for sales and writing and things. Can you give us some ideas on how we can improve our writing? Because I think that'll be super applicable to people, and it will have a pretty high impact.
Two things. One, make it shorter. And two, if you use AI, you have to edit
it. Yeah, I try to dissuade people from using AI.
But let's face it, it's here.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, we can get into a whole conversation about that. I think it's helpful for, organizing your ideas, for, write me 50 subject lines for this email, and then you wind up picking none of them, but one of them gave you an idea for the one you thought of. Like that's the sort of helpful ways to use it. Make it shorter. That's literally, if I could say one thing, and I am following my own advice by doing that. But I just say, make it shorter. Whatever it is, it can be shorter. I used to teach an exercise where you got a 500-word story down to a 250-word story, down to something else in between, down to a tweet. And that was when tweets were 140 characters. So I'm not saying that every 500-word story needs to be a tweet. I'm just saying you can always shorten even more than you think, and even shorten those dang words. Even that, like, don't say utilize when you can say use, for Christ's sake.
So you come to the right audience for that, because I'm like, well, don't use big words. I know big words. I don't need them because I'm speaking to the audience. I'm not trying to show you how smart I am.
That I was literally jumping on the couch the other night because my son, who's actually very smart and a good writer, not going to throw him under the bus, but he was writing one of his supplemental college application essays, and he used something like, I don't know what word. Let's say utilize. It was a better word than that. And I was like, Sam, you absolutely not. Like, I'm very gentle with my editing hand 95% of the time, because it's your essay. Like, I'm not applying to Syracuse, you are, and I'm really good at not, but I was like, Sam, I swear to God, I will pay you $40 not to put that word in your essay. And he was like, but why? It makes me sound smart. And I was like, shut it down. It makes you sound like you looked in the thesaurus. It does not make you sound smart. It makes you sound the opposite of smart, because it makes you sound like you're trying to be smart. So yeah, no big words.
Yeah. Pompous is what it would make you sound.
Yeah. And I also tell people, I've taught a lot of writing. The other thing I'll tell you, and this is what I tell people. Anytime you want to use an adjective or an adverb, you have to put $1 in the jar.
Yes.
It's not that you don't, and like, sure, and it's not a punishment. It's not like a swear jar. Mm-mm. It's just that it's not a punishment. But if you have to stop and think about every single adjective and adverb, and if you really decide that you need it, sure, but you're gonna and you prove it by putting $1 in the adverb and adjective jar. But chances are you're gonna read your sentence again and realize that, no, the person isn't very excited. They're just excited. And then even then, how can I not tell that they're excited? If you say they're excited, I'm bored. Don't use the adjective. Say they jumped up and down on the couch. I don't know. So yeah, those are my two things. Make it shorter, delete almost all adjectives and adverbs, and pay yourself $1 for everyone you need to use.
Yes, I agree with that because I find that if you're using adjectives and adverbs too often, it's just lazy. You
Yep.
know, there's just better ways to get that point across. That is 100% a rule I tell people as well. Also, shorter, because nobody got, as the kids say, nobody's got time for that. But thank you, I'm sorry, or I'm happy for you, however that goes. So, Lynn, how can people find you on the internet? Where do we want to point people?
Thank you. You can go right to Gold Comedy. You can find Gold Comedy at goldcomedy.com or at Gold Comedy on Instagram. And I want to say, this is pretty advertorial here, but I will say to the folks listening that we really do have, we talked about this, but I'll reiterate, we really do have a range of people who come to us to help them succeed in really all their careers and ambitions that have something to do with showbiz or not. We have someone who just registered for our solo show class, who is a consultant to solo entrepreneurs. And she wants to take the class because she wants to take her keynote and her sort of whole personal engagement communication to the next level. We have people who just want to make their stuff funnier, whatever their stuff is. And we can do that too. And our stand-up, like just any class that you take, that not just at Gold, I don't care where, any comedy skills or life skills, they help you write faster, listen sharper, think faster, and read a room. And all of those things are indispensable for all those things are just indispensable for all the things.
Yeah, you need them for everything. It's just like you said, a life skill. Well, yeah. Lynn, thank you so much for doing this.
Welcome. Thank you.
Let me know what you thought about my conversation with Lynn. You can send me an email. It is my name, dave@davewakeman.com. You can visit me at the davewakeman.com website and find out all the kinds of stuff I'm up to. Blog, store, information, all kinds of stuff. So check it out, davewakeman.com. And knowing that we are 45 minutes or so into this podcast, you'll love the Talking Tickets newsletter, which you can get at talkingtickets.substack.com. And there's a Talking Tickets Slack channel, which you can also join, which is somewhere in the vicinity of 400 people hanging out, talking tickets, talking strategy, talking marketing and selling, live events, sports, concerts, the whole deal. Please do me a favor, rate, review, and share the podcast. Any platform helps. It helps people discover the podcast. It helps me continue to get great guests. And positive reinforcement never hurt me. I'm a sucker for it. So please rate, review, and share the podcast. As I like to say at the end of these things, I couldn't do this without you. So thank you so much for being here and listening. And until next time, I'll see you soon. Take it easy.